There are habits you repeat every single day without ever questioning where they came from. Clinking glasses during a toast, or even the way we greet each other. Today, all of this feels normal and part of everyday life. But these customs didn't appear by accident, and the most curious part is that we keep repeating them, even without knowing why. Now you're about to discover 8 common things with surprising origins. Today, high heels are almost exclusively associated with women's fashion, but they weren't created for women, and definitely not for elegance. High heels were invented for soldiers. In the 10th century, stability on horseback was a serious problem for Persian cavalry on the battlefield. To solve this, they began wearing boots with heels. The heel worked like a hook that locked the foot into the stirrup. This was essential for mounted archers, who needed stability to shoot arrows accurately while galloping. The Bata Shoe Museum in Canada even holds original models from that era. In 1599, Persian diplomats arrived in Europe wearing these heeled boots, and their appearance immediately caught the attention of the nobility. The footwear became associated with strength, authority, and military power. In France, this idea was taken to the extreme by King Louis XIV. He adopted high heels, especially red-soled ones, as a personal mark of status and dominance. The handshake didn't originate as a polite gesture or a sign of friendliness. It began as a safety ritual. In ancient societies, especially in Greece and parts of Europe, encounters between strangers could be deadly. Since most people are right-handed, weapons like knives, daggers, or swords were carried in the right hand, but simply showing an empty hand wasn't enough. You had to make sure nothing was hidden. By grabbing the other person's hand and shaking it, you could check whether a concealed dagger might slide down into their palm. At the same time, you neutralized the very hand that could kill you. It was a quick, silent, and socially acceptable frisk. Today, making a toast is a joyful, almost automatic gesture, but for centuries, raising a glass was an act of deep distrust. In ancient Rome and medieval Europe, poisoning was the most common form of political assassination. Kings, nobles, and generals rarely died in battle. They died at dinner tables. Poison had obvious advantages. It was silent, hard to trace, and could be served by someone you trusted. One wrong sip could end a reign. That's where the toast came from, as a survival test. Glasses were intentionally clinked hard so the liquid would spill and mix. If one drink was poisoned, the danger stopped being individual and became shared. By agreeing to drink after that, the host proved they weren't trying to kill anyone at the table. That spinning cylinder with red and white stripes wasn't created to advertise haircuts. In the Middle Ages, there was a profession known as the barber surgeon, and they did much more than trim beards. In an era without accessible doctors, anesthesia, or antibiotics, barbers performed tooth extractions, abscess drainage, and bloodletting. The logic behind bloodletting was simple and dangerous. Many illnesses were believed to be caused by an excess of bad blood. Removing it was considered a cure. During the procedure, the patient would grip a wooden pole tightly to make the veins swell and easier to cut. That pole is exactly what the Barber Pole represents. Red symbolized arterial blood, white represented the bandages used to stop the bleeding. In some versions, blue symbolized venous blood, and in others, it was later added in the United States as a reference to the national flag. After the procedure, the bloodied bandages were washed and hung outside the barbershop to dry. The wind caused them to twist around the pole, creating the red and white spirals. Medicine evolved and barbers stopped operating on bodies. Today, the pole spins quietly on sidewalks, symbolizing nothing more than a haircut. Leave a like if you can't imagine how people survived back then, and subscribe so you don't miss more curiosities. Today, we look at that red line on the side of notebook pages and assume it exists just to organize text. But the origin of margins is far more practical and much older than it seems. Books weren't kept in clean, climate-controlled rooms like today. They were stored in damp basements, wooden libraries, monasteries, and warehouses full of dust, insects, and most importantly, rats. When a rat starts chewing paper, it never attacks the center of the page. It always starts at the edges. Margins were created as a sacrifice zone. If a book was damaged by rodents, insects, or even a small fire, the damage would stay concentrated in the blank area, preserving the text in the center. Piggy banks aren't shaped like pigs because they symbolize savings, prosperity, or stored fat. That association came later. The origin is far more mundane and completely accidental. In medieval England, people stored coins in containers made from a cheap clay called pig. These containers were known as pig jars. Over time, the word pig fell out of use in the English language. Centuries later, when someone asked for a pig jar, craftsmen no longer recognized the original term, and the sound was nearly identical to pig. Potters began interpreting the request literally, and started shaping the containers like pigs. The mistake was a success. The jars stood out, sold well, and spread everywhere. Today, the pig is a universal symbol of saving money, and it all started with a simple misunderstanding. Men's and women's shirts have buttons on opposite sides. This difference didn't come from fashion or aesthetics, but from practicality. For men, the explanation comes directly from combat. For centuries, men's clothing was designed for war. Most men were right-handed and carried their swords on the left side, so they could draw the weapon in one smooth motion with the right hand. If a shirt closed the wrong way, the fabric flap could catch the sword's hilt during the draw. That's why men's buttons were standardized to avoid interfering with weapons. For noble women in Europe, the reason was completely different. During the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, wealthy women didn't dress themselves. Getting dressed was a long ritual done with the help of maids. Since the maid stood facing the woman and was usually right-handed, buttons were sewn on the opposite side to make dressing easier. Over time, these patterns lost their original purpose completely. The pom-pom on top of a beanie looks useless, almost childish, but it was originally a piece of protective equipment in a very specific context. Its origin lies in the French Navy, mainly between the 18th and 19th centuries. Sailors spent months, sometimes years, living inside warships and merchant vessels. These ships had extremely low, narrow corridors filled with exposed wooden beams. With constant movement from the sea, strong waves, and sudden turns, hitting your head wasn't rare. A poorly timed impact could cause deep cuts, knock someone unconscious, or leave a sailor unfit for duty. That's when the beanie known as the bocce appeared, always with a red pom-pom on top. It wasn't there for looks. The pom-pom worked as a crude shock absorber, but more importantly as a tactile sensor. When a sailor felt the pom-pom brush against a beam or low ceiling, they would instinctively lower their head before the real impact happened. It was a simple, cheap, and extremely effective solution in an environment where any mistake could be dangerous. Over time, ships changed, corridors got higher, and the risk disappeared, but the detail remained. What began as safety equipment became nothing more than an aesthetic symbol. Which of these do you use every day without ever imagining where it came from? And check out the video next to this one, where I talk about 8 common things that hide incredible secrets.